helping out Balaji to, kind of make this happen, have people like Ashwini join us and talk about all cool things that they're doing, right? Before I actually introduce her, I wanted to probably try something different this time. I actually want to hear from you maybe a one-liner or one sentence. What is it that you know about Ashwini? It could be anything. Yes? Oh, wow! I didn't know about Bharatanatyam.
Oh, you do Bharatanatyam.
That's amazing.
My whole identity. I did my Aragetum I still dance, but I did my Aragetum 10 years ago. I started like that's when everyone found out.
Amazing. Wow. What else?
I know a lot about her. I want to know what she's done.
Oh, plenty of things. Sports. I will never play a sport in my life. You'll never see me playing a sport because I'm that bad.
Okay. Anybody else?
You have to say so many things, but I'm lost of words.
Say whatever.
Anything that comes on top of
Yeah. So, of course, Ashwini's profile is amazing. I would say very, very hard-working girl. But what always caught my attention was her love and bond towards her parents. I've always seen all three of them walking on the streets of Ayurveda, and I see them discussing so many things, and that is something which has got my attention. And I really love it. Do it. Keep doing it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's lovely. That's a dream of mine also now. To ensure I bring my daughter up in a similar way that.
And she would always be talking.
Army people, they are always very encouraging, very sweet.
I've always seen her talking and walking.
Yeah.
It's all family.
No,
Yeah.
I want to just add, I've always seen her walking in between her father and mother, which I found so cute. Many a times I got my attention too.
Nice.
Only child behavior.
Once a child, always a child.
She's jealous.
Yeah.
Nice. Anything else?
And
Anybody?
recently I wanted to say she became friends with my daughter and so on. And she got somebody going around with her. I keep pushing her. I make so many friends. You go. She said I can't go like that. I'm so happy for that.
It's so
But
nice.
she connected with Ashwini and Kathy.
Okay.
That's the.
So many people our age used to not hang out with one another. Our friends
So most of your age group would come during the vacation.
Yeah.
I mean, now all the kids are out. So.
Great. So many things apart from what she is currently doing in digital fashion and creative technology. So in fact, we were talking half an hour back, and there's so much in this industry that's happening from an educational front. What can be done? What shouldn't be done? How you can probably explore to be top in this market? Where's the gap between India and global that way? And also in terms of technology of what is there in Metaverse, what's the growth that we can expect. And also I was just touching upon, from an investor point of view, what's the growth and probably where you probably want to invest your money also. So let's see what all probably you can cover today. And
So it's Shark Tank.
Yeah.
You have to pitch to us.
And,
You'll have some group of investors coming from this.
So I'll leave it up to you. So yeah, go ahead and see what all you can
You
cover.
should formally welcome her. I'll give her the bouquet.
Ek minute, okay? Photo.
All the best, Rita. Yeah. Thank you.
This is a really exciting experience because normally I presented for universities and things, but this is presenting to my family, and so that's really, really special. I'm really excited to be able to do that. Hi everyone. As you know, my name is Ashwini Deshpande. I'm a digital fashion designer, creative technologist, and a proud resident of Rainbow Drive. And thank you so much to Namrata and also to Balaji Uncle, who's not here today, for helping organize this and making this happen, and also to all of you for being here to support me and to learn about something that may not necessarily be related to your life, but something that you might still be interested in. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the field that I'm in, which is digital fashion. And I'm also going to be talking about my work in this space. So this is a little introduction to me. I'm a graduate of London College of Fashion. I studied BA Fashion Design and Development, which is very much a traditional course where you learn pattern making, designing, tailoring, all these different things. After that, I went to a startup called Republique, which is the world's first fully digital fashion startup. And it was a very small company when I joined. So it was basically a founder, and I was the first full-time employee of the company. So I joined as the head of 3D design. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my work from my days at Republique as well soon. After that, I joined Meta, which all of you have probably heard of. It was previously called Facebook. And I was there as a digital fashion designer, which I'm sure, again, you're interested to know more about what a digital fashion designer does at a company like Meta. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Right now, I'm here for a couple of months back home in Bangalore in RBD. And I've basically been traveling all over the country, as well as within Bangalore and Karnataka, doing lectures at different universities about the future of fashion. So I'm doing workshops on virtual reality and different lectures on metaverse, digital fashion, fashion for production, all of these different things. And I've done about 15 plus universities so far, including NIFT and LISA and Army Fashion Institute and a lot of different ones. And I'm here until August. In August, I'm moving to Chicago to do an MBA at Kellogg School of Management. So that's what lies ahead for me. Okay, so what is digital fashion? Has anyone heard of this term, digital fashion, before? No? Okay, that's amazing. For the first time, I have a completely fresh audience, an unbiased audience as well, who doesn't have any preconceived notions about digital fashion. So digital fashion is basically garments that only exist virtually. So they only exist inside your computer. They're not physically made. They're made using different 3D CGI softwares. So you might have seen, for example, obviously within animation you have CGI, you have different characters that are animated digitally. Or within things like architecture, you might see a 3D model virtually of a building. So this is the same thing, but in fashion design. So it's CGI versions of fashion design. So these are some of the popular softwares that are used: Clo3D, Browseware, Optex, etc. And they're relatively new. These have become popular only in the last maybe 5 years, and especially took off because of COVID. So this is still very much kind of an early niche in the fashion industry. So this is an example of how the interface for Clo3D looks. So these are the patterns that you physically make when you're making garments as well. So these patterns are made digitally, and then you can actually sew them up digitally as well onto your avatar, and you can see how it would look on a person. You can even change the measurements of that avatar, all these different things, and see how it would fit, how it would drape. You can change the type of fabric, you can change the color, the transparency, you can change a lot of different factors and really try to make it look realistic or however you want it to. So I'm going to look at 2 different applications of digital fashion. So digital fashion is anything made using this digital fashion CGI software, right? And so there are 2 different applications of this. The first application is in garment production. So this is an example of a tech pack. So when a design team, whether that's a small design studio or the design team in a big brand, when they design a product, say they design this pair of pants, they create these tech packs which basically have all of the details of this garment. They have all of the measurements, the different swatches, like all the details, including which brand that zipper is from, what manufacturer it's from, exactly what code of color it is, and what length it is, all of these small details, so that the factory can actually go and manufacture this garment. So what happens when you normally send across this document? The factory makes one sample of this garment and sends it back to the design team. So they look at the sample, they decide whether they like it, whether there needs to be some small changes, and they send back their feedback. And this happens multiple times, usually about 10 or 12 times at least. They send samples back and forth around the world because a lot of times the design teams are based in the West, maybe in the US or in Europe. And the factories are based maybe in China and Bangladesh, sometimes in India. And so a lot of back and forth happens. And this is an example of a drawing that's done using a software called Illustrator. So it's very much, it's almost like drawing by hand, but within the computer. So you basically try to draw exactly how the garment would look so that the factory gets a better idea. Now this version of these pants are made using the 3D software Clo3D. And the reason this is better and more helpful is that you can actually send the 3D file itself to the factory as a designer. And so they're able to not just see the different illustrations and details that you've written down or drawn, they can see every single detail of the garment and exactly how it's supposed to fit, the exact measurements, all of these things within the 3D file. So this way they're able to make a much more accurate sample right away. And so maybe you'll need to ship these samples across the world 1 or 2 times with a few alterations. But other than that, it'll be ready for mass production very quickly compared to if you weren't using 3D software. So that's one of the applications. So brands like, for example, Tommy Hilfiger are basically using this 3D software and this digital supply chain to make on-demand clothing. So instead of producing clothing in huge volumes and then, maybe they're not able to sell it, which happens more often than you think, And a large portion of these garments are then discarded. They're just sent straight to landfills, for example, which is hugely unsustainable. And so by using these tools, because you're able to produce these garments much more quickly in the various sizes, they're able to really create on-demand clothing. On the other hand, there are these ultra-fast fashion companies like Shein, or in India, for example, Zudio is an ultra-fast fashion company where every time you walk by the window, you probably see new garments, right? And a lot of these are very cheap, very, very affordable, but they're also not great quality. You buy them, you put them in the washing machine maybe 2 or 3 times, they kind of lose shape, you discard them very quickly, again, go straight into landfills, and then you buy more garments, which making those garments takes a lot of resources as well. So again, that's not a very sustainable way to consume fashion. So these companies are basically using this technology to produce more and more garments, right? Because they're able to create garments more quickly. And so they're making more and more collections every single day, which is an example of how technology can be used for good, but also for bad. Now we'll move on to the second use case of these digital fashion softwares, which is digital-only fashion. So these are garments that exist in your computer, but are never actually produced in real life. So one example is this project that I did as a freelancer for an NGO called Our Sustainable, based in Scotland. So they basically had a bunch of local seamstresses design garments and make these garments. And they were going to have a fashion show, which was a charitable fashion show to raise money for a certain cause. Except then COVID hit, and they weren't able to have this fashion show. So that's where I came in, and I basically took these garments that they designed, and I digitized them and created a digital replica of these garments, and created a digital fashion show. And this is kind of a very simple version of a digital fashion show. It can be done in much more complex ways, but this was kind of early on in my career. And so by kind of sharing this, they were still able to have a virtual fashion show and still able to raise money for the charity that they wanted to. So this is a very simple use case of digital-only fashion. And a lot of fashion brands have jumped on this, and obviously they have larger teams, larger budgets and things, so they're able to do even cooler ones. This is quite simple, but they can do it in a video game format, for example. No, it's all done, the stitching is all done virtually within the software itself. So it's also much quicker to make than a physical garment, and you don't need to buy a ton of fabric and things like that, so it's more sustainable as well.
Good work. What is R in R sustainable?
Not sure. Yeah, just the name, I think it's, yeah. And so, the other use case for digital-only fashion is the metaverse. And when we think about the metaverse, it's basically the internet in 3D. And the greatest example of that right now that's really kind of a functional space, functional 3D space that the metaverse almost like inspired by, that's a step ahead of other industries, is video games. And so one way to use digital-only fashion is to create garments for video games and for your avatars within video games. So this is a graph showing the value of the video game industry in India from 2007 to 2022. So you can see in 2007, it was about 4 billion Indian rupees. And in 2022, it's 143 billion Indian rupees. And globally, this market is worth, trillions of dollars. And so it's a huge market. And a lot of this, people also spend money on actually buying video games. But a huge amount of this money is actually spent on buying assets within those video games. So buying, clothes for your avatars, buying accessories for your avatars is hugely important, especially, to Gen Z and to Gen Alpha, because so much of our identity is now online. I mean, I'm sure a lot of, at least my generation, can relate to buying a certain dress because they think, oh, this would look really nice in a picture and to post on Instagram, for example. And this is basically the equivalent of that. Platforms like Roblox, about 50% of their users are below the age of 18, and they're very much digital natives who are not scared to spend real money within these virtual platforms. This is one example of something that Gucci did in the metaverse. And so Roblox, as I said, has a very young consumer base. And Gucci basically went in there and created this whole space where you could go in and you could have an adventure, you could collect different products, and you could also buy Gucci products within this space. And the amazing thing that they did, first of all, they created an alternate revenue stream for themselves beyond physical clothing. But the other thing is, when you're speaking to such a young customer, for example, 12-year-olds within Roblox, you're building that brand loyalty from really early on. For example, when these kids grow up in 20 years' time, when they can actually afford to buy a real luxury product, if they've heard of Gucci but they haven't heard of Chanel, they're much more likely to have an affinity for this brand Gucci and buy Gucci. So it's really a way of marketing in a very smart way and in a very kind of with a future vision in mind. So this Gucci Dionysus bag, for instance, sold for $4,000 within Roblox. And the really funny bit is that this physical bag, if you go in and buy it, the retail price is about $2,600. So people actually spend so much more money buying it on Roblox than they would in real life. Balenciaga actually released one of their fashion collections as a video game. So normally they have their collections displayed at Paris Fashion Week, but this is limited to a very specific kind of audience, a very elite audience who work in the industry, who receive invites, who are able to have the resources to fly to Paris and attend these shows. Whereas with this video game, they were able to really reach out to a much larger audience all over the world. And it was a really interesting way for people to kind of engage with the brand. Okay, now I'll be talking a little bit about my journey within this industry. So in 2019, when I was in my second year of London College of Fashion, there was a competition by Microsoft called the Future of Fashion Challenge in combination with the Fashion Innovation Agency. And so they basically wanted fashion students to submit ideas of how they would use technology in the fashion industry. And at the time, I've always been passionate about sustainability, and at the time I was looking at pattern cutting as well and how we can reduce the amount of fabric wastage during fashion production. There's something called zero waste pattern cutting, which is a creative method of reducing fabric wastage during fashion production. So I started thinking about whether you can use AI to automate this process. And that's how Artsy was born, and I spent about 2 years working on this startup, Artsy. So I went on to be part of Microsoft Incubator and then win the Future of Fashion Award. So I got to go to Silicon Valley for a week and work with Microsoft engineers to work on my idea further. And I also got funding through a couple of competitions like the Student Enterprise Challenge and the Creative Enterprise Awards. As well as the Mayor's competition, which is open to all students around London, and the East London Innovators Contest in 2020.
Very nice.
My work was featured in these publications as well. the amazing thing that this did was that I was able to build a huge network within the fashion technology space. And that's when I started to find out about digital fashion. So then I was going into my final year, and COVID hit. And normally in your final year of fashion school, you create a physical fashion collection, you have a NAMM walk, you have a photo shoot, and all these different things. But because of COVID, we couldn't really do any of those things because we didn't have access to sewing machines, couldn't have too many people in one place to have a fashion show. So then I thought, now is the time to really explore digital fashion and maybe make a fully digital fashion collection. So that had never been done before at LCF, but I went to my course leader, to my program director, and they were very supportive, and they said, there's only so much we can support you because we don't know how to use these softwares, but if you're confident, go for it. You don't have to make a physical collection. So I went ahead and made a fully digital fashion collection for my final year. And I'm going to be showing you a short video of that. So I also created a virtual reality space to display that fashion collection within. And the inspiration for my collection was that I wanted to really link fashion to farming. Because the first step of every sustainable fashion supply chain is farming. Whether it's cotton, wool, silk, but people forget that connection. They think that fashion is just about the pomp and show behind things like Fashion Week. And so I wanted to kind of re-establish that connection. And so I made what you can see is kind of almost like a magical tree with garments growing from it. And then you can see women almost like plucking those garments straight from the tree. So it was a kind of fun way for me to express my thoughts and express my inspiration behind this collection. And the amazing thing is, in the physical fashion world, this would have been impossible for me to create because, a lot of this is, in terms of physics, just unviable. But also this would require a huge budget, a huge team of people to collaborate with, whereas virtually I was able to make the space completely on my own, and the space and collection was made within 6 months, using mostly free softwares. And it was just, basically my imagination was the only limit. I could create anything I wanted in virtual reality.
Nice, very nice.
Very nice.
So a lot of these elements of the world that you see, so the garments itself were made using Clo 3D, which is one of the fashion CGI softwares. But the environment itself, I was thinking about how to create that because that requires superior kind of 3D modeling skills to actually be able to build the world. But instead of trying to use those softwares that I was unfamiliar with, I turned to another source. I created those elements using virtual reality drawing tools. So I basically wore a virtual reality headset and I literally drew in 3D space. So it was a very intuitive, easy way of creating all of these different elements of the environment that I wanted to create. So this is an example of me drawing something in virtual reality. And you can see how simple it is. It doesn't require complex CGI training to be able to do that.
You created a great opportunity during COVID.
Yeah, definitely. And that's when the industry really, the digital fashion industry really boomed. And a lot of companies were also struggling with their global supply chains because suddenly the teams sitting in Italy, for example, couldn't travel to Bangladesh to see how the manufacturing was happening. And so that's when they realized the value of really digitizing their supply chains. And once you're creating these digital products to be made physically, you think about, is there another easy way to use these digital assets that I've created? And a great way to do that is virtual reality, the metaverse, and gaming. So when I graduated in 2021, I joined the digital fashion startup Republique. So as I told you, I was the first full-time employee of the company, so it was a really interesting experience. We would take on just like random projects, anything that would come our way, and we would just make it work, make it happen. So it was a huge learning curve, but it was a lot of experimentation, and it was a lot of fun, and I had a lot of control over the work that I was doing for a young person in industry. So our main business model that we started off with is that we created digital fashion collections like the one that you can see on your left-hand side. And so that garment was never made physically. This garment that you can see, this, the model wearing the garment, so this was actually just a picture of this girl wearing a black tank top, black shorts, and holding a Burberry bag. This was for a Burberry campaign. And then this image, this digital fashion garment, was superimposed onto her image. But it also looks quite realistic, and this was a really great way for them to do this campaign and do this photo shoot in, first of all, a more cost-effective way. So they didn't have to buy a lot of garments and have this model change every time they wanted a picture with a new bag, right? She wore a regular t-shirt and shorts and then held all of these different bags, and they took these beautiful pictures across the city of Paris, and then they just sent it to us. And we superimposed these really cool garments onto her picture. So this is an example of me. This was the before picture of me wearing, a physical dress, and then in this version, I've superimposed a digital garment onto myself. And so this is really great for a lot of people who are on social media, who are influencers, for example, who want to try on all these really cool clothes. But first of all, clothes like this might be difficult for them to afford, so even if they want to try it on and have fun with it, they're unable to. But also because it's a lot more unsustainable if you buy a garment physically just for social media and try it on and never wear it again. Whereas with this, the carbon footprint is much smaller, so you can try it on once, digitally, share the picture, have fun with it, without having a larger carbon footprint. These are some examples, it's a little bit saturated, but these are some examples of some of the garments we made at Republic. And so this example, a garment like this would be really difficult to make in real life, and also very expensive to make, unsustainable to make. Maybe, Lady Gaga would wear it once to the Grammys, but you and I would never get to wear something like this. But, using digital fashion for like $10, $20, you can try on something like this. You can share the image on social media with your friends, and you can really have fun with it. These are some more digital garments we designed. And this is a collection for dogs. If you have a dog, you know that they probably don't like wearing clothes, so you can just take a picture with them, and then they can be wearing matching clothes to you without actually having to force them into those garments. This is our cyber collection. These are some more examples from that Burberry campaign. So these are all digital garments that we superimposed onto the pictures from this photo shoot. Now the thing is, when we were doing this, we realized that this process of superimposing the garment onto the picture is quite a labor-intensive process, and so it ends up being quite expensive, to spend time really doing that, making sure the lighting, the shadows, the sizing, the poses, everything is perfect. So then we collaborated with a Paris-based AI startup called Yokai, and we basically automated this process using AI. So what they were able to do, once somebody sent in a picture, they could estimate the size, the pose, the lighting, the shadows, all these different things. And using the 3D file, they could automatically superimpose the image, the garment onto the image. So by the time I left, for about 95% of images, we were able to get this final image with just a click of a button, instead of having to spend an hour manually doing this whole process. This was a campaign that we did for Coach, and this was for a suit company. We also worked with a fast fashion company called ASOS, that's a really big fast fashion company in the UK. And the thing is, ASOS has this huge problem with how unsustainable they are, essentially, and they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint. So they wanted to use digital fashion to reduce their carbon footprint. So what they do, they often ship a lot of their garments to influencers all over the world, who basically take pictures and videos for social media, post it for marketing purposes, tag the brand, but then they discard the garment because they get such a huge number of garments for all the different brands that they don't really use these garments. So what we did, we created digital twins of ASOS's physical garments so that the influencers could basically send in a picture to us instead, and we'd superimpose that garment onto them so that they can still post the picture for marketing purposes, but without ASOS having to ship thousands and thousands of garments to influencers all over the world, hence reducing their carbon footprint. These are some more garments for ASOS. So then we started getting approached by brands to actually build for gaming and the metaverse. And this is one of the first projects that we did like that. So Decentraland is actually a social virtual reality place. So people go in there and they interact with their friends in VR, maybe on their computer or maybe on their VR headset. And the special thing about Decentraland, now I'm not going to go into the details of this, but you've probably come across the words blockchain and NFT. And so within Decentraland, it's basically the whole platform is built on the blockchain. So every asset that you purchase within the platform is bought as an NFT. So that just means that the digital assets within this platform, you're guaranteed ownership, and that is actually an investment. So you can resale that piece, that NFT piece, and actually get back your money for it. So people are willing to spend a lot more money on digital assets within this platform. So I'm going to play a short video of a space that we built for this platform, where we displayed various different products like bags and shoes and garments, and you could basically click on it and buy it as an NFT, and your avatar could actually wear that piece, that accessory or that garment as well. That's how the space looks. I'm also part of something called the Digital Maker Collective that I joined in 2020 during COVID. So it's basically a voluntary collective based in London where we come together. During COVID, it was virtual, and we would come together and we were, an interdisciplinary collective where there were people from a fine art background, from theater, people from technology, from interior design, from fashion design. We'd come together and we would explore emerging technologies together and host events within virtual reality. So this is one of the first platforms that we built together. So this was for a digital immersive roundtable discussion where we had about 7 different people. So this video was taken when the space was empty and I was the only avatar within the space. But when we were actually having the slide discussion, we had about 7 different speakers come into this space as avatars and have a live discussion about digital fashion. And the amazing thing about this, so this platform is actually called Frame VR, especially for the young people who are interested potentially in this field. And it's a super easy platform to use. It's completely free. It's WebXR, so that means you don't need a headset, you don't need any kind of fancy laptop. You can literally build within your iPad or any regular laptop. You can even enter this space on your phone. So if you type in framevr.io/digital fashion, you can actually go into this space and walk around and check it out for yourselves. And to build within this platform, the only software that you need to be able to use is an image making software like, for example, Illustrator or Photoshop. So this is a really fun way of kind of prototyping in virtual reality. With the Digital Maker Collective, we were also part of something called IAC Weekend, which is a sustainable technology conference that happens every year in Barcelona. So again, within this space, we had a discussion about fashion, digital fashion, and sustainability. And to end the event, we wanted some kind of showstopper, some really exciting way of communicating data to other people, but in a fun way related to digital fashion. And so we basically collected data about carbon emissions over the last century for every decade. And then I created this black jacket that you can see, which, if you're in virtual reality at the conference itself, you can actually see this huge in the sky. And so this garment, you can see, has a lot of red dots on it. So when it first enters the screen, the number of red dots is a lot lower because it represents the amount of carbon emissions at the beginning of the century, and that keeps increasing in proportion to the actual carbon emissions that increased over the last century. So it was a really fun way of kind of showing people data and showing people the impact that we're having on the Earth as a human race, but in a fun digital fashion way. So here you can see more clearly that the dots keep increasing with time. And those little, these little people, you can see that was us in VR. So you can imagine how we saw this presentation, as this huge jacket in the sky. And then in 2022, after a year at Republic, I was approached by Meta, which again you might know as Facebook, to join them as a digital fashion designer as part of their R&D team. So we were only 3 digital fashion designers globally, and some of the things we did were, one, we were kind of like fashion consultants to the engineering team. So they were building different fashion capabilities for the metaverse. And we were the one advising them of, what the fashion industry wanted. So, for example, if you're a fashion brand and you have a digital asset that you've made using Flow3D, what would you want to do with that? Would you want to put that into gaming? Would you want to put that into augmented reality? How would you want that to work? What software would you want that to be, compatible with? All of those different things were, that's what we were advising them on. We were also helping them create digital garments for experimentation and to also create a machine learning database, because if you're going to be AI generating garments, that AI needs a database to learn from. And so we were helping build that digital database of garments for it to learn from. We were also experimenting with different softwares, different formats to see what works best within our virtual reality devices, for instance. So we were basically using artificial intelligence to build these fashion capabilities within the metaverse. And here were some of the key capabilities that we were trying to build that honestly not just Meta, but any big company is basically trying to build for the fashion industry today. So one is, I'm sure you've seen text-to-image AI generation. So for example, if you say a cat wearing sunglasses, then the AI will give you a picture of a cat wearing sunglasses. So one of the things we were trying to do with Meta was to actually turn that into 3D. So that if you see a cat wearing sunglasses, it gives you not just a 2D image, but also a 3D mesh of that object. So that can actually be used in the metaverse and in things like gaming, which is a lot more complicated than just going from text to image. The second one is image to 3D. So for instance, within Instagram, I'm sure you've all seen, even within Facebook, I think, you have these little avatars of yourself, and you can give it a certain kind of haircut, you can give it a certain kind of dress, all that kind of stuff, and dress it up how you want. Now, what if you wanted to say, say I took a selfie or a picture of myself today and said, I want my avatar to look exactly like me within these platforms. That would be quite difficult to do because you may not have the exact same hairstyle as me on the platform, you may not have the same garments available to you, so you'd pick maybe something that's a close fit but not exactly the same. Or if you wanted exactly the same thing, you'd need a 3D artist behind the scenes actually sitting and looking at that image and converting it into 3D. So what we were trying to do is basically automate that process using AI, so that if you take a selfie or you take a picture, within the click of a button, that can be worn by your avatar because the AI is able to create it in 3D right away. Another application of AI in the metaverse is something called interoperability. So if you were to go buy a really nice, expensive black dress, but you could only wear it to one place, to one restaurant in Indranagar, you can't wear it anywhere else, you wouldn't really want to buy it, right? Like, that's not very useful. And that's the problem with the metaverse and gaming today. Because if you're playing a game, for example, Fortnite, and you buy a certain garment within that platform, then, say all of your friends say, oh, I don't want to use that platform anymore, let's go play a different game. Then you basically no longer have access to that asset that you used to own, and you need to go buy a new garment, and maybe a different garment that you don't like as much within another platform. But with interoperability, you basically can take those assets across different platforms. Now that's quite difficult to do for multiple reasons, for example around ownership, but there are elements of that NFTs and blockchain are solving. But another big problem with that is that, as you can see in these 3 different platforms, for instance, the style of the avatar is very different. The style of the garment and assets you need within that platform are very different as well. And so to be able to have a 3D artist create this same asset for every single type of platform out there is basically impossible. But if you're able to use AI to automatically generate that in lots of different formats and have ownership within multiple platforms, that increases the value of the digital assets themselves. And that's hugely beneficial to the fashion industry because say, Gucci wanted to sell within Roblox, that means that they no longer have to sell only within Roblox. They can charge twice the price and sell within Roblox and have that available on every other kind of platform as well. Okay, so as I said, what's next for me? So I'm currently giving lectures in Bangalore and all over India on digital fashion, and I'm going to be doing an MBA this fall. And after that, I hope to stay in the fashion industry, in the business and innovation space, and essentially work with brands to try to integrate things like innovation, digital fashion, AI, metaverse into their business models. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it. This is really
Very
fun to be able
impressive.
to share a different side of me with RBD, who I said are like my family. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or we can have like a little discussion. So please let me know if you have any questions at all.
You were too good. It will take us time to come out. We were just exhausted. Yeah.
You can have some. Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, so first, just clarifying the basic understanding. What you're creating is all digital.
Yeah, it's all digital.
So when you buy that, it is a digital asset that you're buying.
Yes. Yeah.
The second question is, do you think that you can apply that in the movie, real movies like Bollywood movies, etc.? Because
Yeah.
the reason I'm saying is that, cartoon characters or whatever are fun.
Yeah.
And then changing a digital avatar on the social media. But if you look at the movie production,
Yeah.
a lot of expenses goes on the costume.
Yeah.
Right? So if during the time of editing, if they can wear a different color, they can shoot with another costume.
Yeah.
But it
Absolutely.
can be changed, then it would be a huge cost saving on the production cost of the movie.
Yeah,
Do you think
absolutely.
that is possible?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is something that's already starting to happen, in fact. So for example, Clo3D actually has a sister software called Marvelous Designer, which is made more for CGI and for movies. But you can, make the same garments. So for example, Superman's cape, when he's flying in space, you want it to float a certain way, for it to, fly in the direction of the wind, all that kind of stuff. So that is right now made using CGI, using software such as Marvelous Designer. And even within animations, now you get some really high quality animations where if a character, even if, for example, they sit on the sofa, you want the physics of that sofa and the fabric and everything to be very realistic. And CGI is being used for that right now. So I think it's quite a fine line actually between VFX designers and CGI designers and fashion designers. And so we're kind of almost using their software in a slightly different way, but the capabilities and the skills that we have do overlap significantly. So.
And did you need to know the programming or anything like that to use it? Or it is all very, using the software, does it require programming knowledge?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. So softwares like Clo3D are completely, if you have a knowledge of pattern making, that's really helpful. So it's very much targeted towards people with fashion backgrounds, these softwares. Some of the platforms like the virtual reality software that I use for my final collection, which is a game engine called Unity, that requires a little bit of coding, but I don't really code as such. Based on the capabilities that I wanted within the platform, I copy-pasted a few lines of code from here and there from the internet, but it doesn't require a huge amount of coding unless you're doing something very complex.
But you create a digital asset, right? Is it patentable, or somebody else can do the same, come up with the same one?
That's a really good point. So IP rights is like a huge kind of, still quite a huge issue in this space, obviously. I mean, it's also a huge issue in the fashion industry in general, obviously, right? Like with a lot of knockoffs and things like that. But I mean, you can kind of, I mean, I think the closest to patenting it in a way is to turn it into an NFT. So if you put it on the blockchain and turn it into an NFT, you can kind of guarantee that you can separate the original product with other knockoff digital assets of the same product. So you can guarantee ownership. But I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done in this space, because if it's not on the blockchain, if it's not an NFT, then yeah, definitely it is. I mean, there is some, you know, you do have some IP rights, but it's quite hard to enforce those IP rights as of today.
So you were definitely a very impressive work, very excellent presentation. I just wanted to understand that if there is any such space created in the Indian fashion industry. Where does the Indian fashion industry stand? Why don't you actually do something for the Indian fashion industry?
Yeah, so it is early stages in India with this stuff. I mean, it's early stages anywhere, but especially in India, I think. The main application of digital fashion in India right now is more within production, because obviously we're a huge manufacturer of garments, and we have a lot of different factories and a lot of global supply chains. So it is very much being taken up by industry in that sense. But when it comes to the metaverse and gaming, the uptake is not as much. There are quite a few individuals who are kind of on their own building garments for video games and making a sort of passive income sitting in India and selling these digital assets all over the world, whether that's, you know, through NFTs or whether that's through video games, etc. And there are a few companies like there's a company called Paparoon Preach that once had a virtual fashion show. But yeah, it's still kind of early stages and early days, which is why I'm trying to kind of like go around to different universities and educate people about this, so the Indian fashion students can also start to, you know, use these different softwares and bring this stuff to Indian fashion brands or to wherever they go next.
Thank you, Ashmi. Because really your passion and knowledge is really showing.
Thank you.
It's a topic which many of us are totally unfamiliar with. Getting a glimpse of that is very great. So my question is to go back to your childhood and all, with AI coming up and even like threatening the creative industry itself, right? Like you said, you can tell AI to do a lot of the things which you are doing. And that's one question, like how do you see the role of the creativity in your work going ahead with AI as an assistant? And the second question is, what are the skills and things which motivated you to come to this space which you are in right now from childhood?
Thank you. Two really good questions. Okay, so first of all, when it comes to AI and kind of integration with work and everything, I think there are a lot of creatives who are afraid of AI coming in and taking their jobs. But I think in reality, AI and people, actual humans, will always work together, especially within the creative space, because AI can't be creative on its own. It can only replicate what's already happened before. It can only borrow from the existing database. Whereas in the fashion industry, if you look at kind of the trends always, right, since forever, from Yves Saint Laurent, like back in the day, from, you know, his work in the 50s and 60s. The reason he was such a revolutionary designer is because he was able to recognize what people will want before they said they wanted it, right? Like he created this incredibly creative Mondrian dress, for example, which, you know, at the time when people first saw it, they thought this is crazy. They had seen nothing like it before, and that's not something that AI would ever be able to design, and yet that became a complete sensation. So I think there's no replacement for human creativity, but AI can help us be even more creative and kind of help our process within our creative practice. So for instance, there are a lot of design studios that are using AI to do their initial sampling and prototyping. So when they come up with an idea, you know, they enter what they want within an AI assistant, and then it comes up with some ideas for the designs, and then they're able to take those ideas and push them even further so that they're able to, you know, improve their work using AI. Also, there are a lot of the kind of more menial tasks that humans don't want to do, For example, actually converting certain digital assets into different formats. That can be quite a difficult, time-consuming job that's not necessarily very fun for a creative person to do. And places like that, AI can really help to kind of make that load, take that load off designers, and aid that process and basically automate that process. So I mean, I think there's still a lot to figure out as we go along, but I definitely see it as you said, the word you used of an AI assistant. That's definitely how I see it. I think creatives will be working alongside AI, and that the demand for creativity is never going to reduce because of AI.
Maybe a structured course can be offered to our fashion schools in India, coming back, revisiting my question of our exposure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so that's, that's kind of what I've been trying to do to some extent. So there are a lot more people offering courses on things like Flow 3D right now. So Flow 3D has actually set up an office, a pretty big office in Bangalore right now, because they're trying to get digital fashion education across the globe and across our country as well. But I think there's still there are limitations when it comes to how much people know about things like the metaverse and clothing for the metaverse and all of that. So that's something that I am kind of trying to bridge. I've been doing some online mentorship sessions as well. So these are free sessions that basically students from across the country can sign up for, where they learn how to use a couple of different tools, and they also just learn about the digital fashion industry in general on a global scale. And sorry, I think there was, you had another question as well about how I kind of got into this. So I think from early on, how I got into fashion design was just from early on. I quite enjoyed kind of, things like drawing and painting and the creative side of things, as well as dressing up in fashion and all of that as well. And so I always had this idea of I wanted to do something creative, and so eventually I decided on fashion design. And once I went to the UK, I think one of the big things that pushed me into digital fashion was COVID, obviously, because that was when the industry really started looking at digital fashion more seriously. But also, I think having grown up in Bangalore with so many engineers around me, I mean, so many of my friends are engineers as well, I think I already had this affinity for technology and AI, and I knew a lot more about it than a regular fashion designer would, because I was having some of these conversations with my engineering friends. And so when this opportunity came up, I had the resources to be able to reach out to other engineers who are actually working on AI and get their input of what they think about this, and what they think of my startup, for example, and how AI can be used for fashion. And I think my background of having grown up in Bangalore really helped me embrace digital fashion as well. Yeah.
I have a question. So, if you can name the brands or influences to watch out for, or probably take inspiration from, in both digital fashion and metaverse, for aspirants to probably watch out for and take inspiration.
So some of the brands and influencers I take in. So, there's some amazing ones out there. So one, for example, is The Fabricant. The Fabricant is based in Amsterdam. They're kind of one of the very early leaders in the digital fashion space. And right now they mostly create digital assets as NFTs and sell them and things, but they're basically a leader in the digital fashion space, and they create really beautiful digital garments, and they're at the peak of innovation in that space. Another very similar one is the Institute of Digital Fashion, and all of these brands are very active on social media. So on Instagram, if you want to follow their work, you definitely can. They do some really cool work. So the Institute of Digital Fashion as well. And then there's Ouroboros, which is a London-based fashion company. So it's like a luxury digital fashion company. So the way at Republic we were making these digital fashion garments and putting on to influencer images, they do the same thing, but a luxury version of that, which it's crazy to imagine a market for that, and yet there is a market for that. These people are, their garments cost hundreds of pounds or even thousands of pounds, and it exists only digitally. But it's a huge kind of almost like a digital status symbol. It's like holding a Gucci bag in real life, but the digital version. And they're doing some really cool things within the space, and they have some amazing kind of design work happening behind the scenes as well. So those are definitely some of them. Also, the Fashion Innovation Agency that I mentioned was one of the sponsors for the competition that I won. They're amazing as well. So they actually come under the umbrella of London College of Fashion, but they're an industry-facing unit, and they're very much, they do a lot of very innovative work. They're really at the peak of innovation. So, yeah.
Nice. Very nice.
Presentation can be done when you speak something. And you can let somebody else speak the same.
So like you mean like deep fakes and like, yeah, no, definitely. I think there are a lot of technologies out there coming for that, and a lot of problems with that as well that we've seen, where celebrities' faces are changed and things like that. And even, within digital fashion, like making as we make the avatars more and more realistic, there are some issues with that because you can make it so realistic that it feels like a real person. So for example, within Unreal, there's a software called MetaHumans, which can make really, really realistic avatars. And so, you can send a video to someone with that avatar speaking, and then that can be quite misleading. But I think there are more and more kind of laws coming in place to kind of restrict the usage of these softwares and to be able to, legally kind of handle these issues. But it's definitely something that technologically it is possible.
Just a time check. No questions.
Lovely presentation.
All right, thank you guys so much. My mom, who you know is an amazing cook, and brought some snacks. for
Yeah.
you to go to eat and snacks.
I'm already waiting for it and eating it.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Namrata.
And thanks to Balaji, first of all, to running RBD Talks. He's the one who kind of sourced and had conversation on what Ashwini can actually speak today. So thanks to him, he's not here today. Thank you, Ashwini, so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Namrata.
Prajakti, as well, for bringing in snacks. Yeah, she made it this morning. She thought about it last night, and she spent all her day in the morning to prepare something for all of us. So thank you so much for joining. Maybe before that, let's take one.
Oh, let's take a group photo. Yeah. Should we switch off the projector?
You want to present something nice behind?